Hey guys, I thought I'd start with a bit of a different intro for this podcast and introduce who I am a little more first. So, my name is Terry Ibel. When I was 14 years old, I started making stop motion animations in my bedroom using my grandpa's old camera. And with these animations, I went on to win the local high school film competition for 3 years in a row. However, when I graduated high school, I got super freaked out by pursuing a career in animation. So instead, I went to business school and graduated with a BBA. For about the next 7 years, I worked as a market analyst and a content manager and SEO specialist. However, I just couldn't escape animation. And all that time, I was doing creative projects on the side. I was waking up at like 5 a.m. every day to draw and paint and sculpt and write and do short films and comics and anything I could as an outlet. But after all that time, I realized I don't want animation to just be an outlet for me. It's something I want to do with my life. So I've finally taken the steps to get into the industry. I quit my job and I started going to Sheridan College last year. I also began to search for a podcast that would really dig deep into what it takes to become successful in the animation industry, and I couldn't really find one. So I just decided to create one myself. And now this is it. Welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. Here, you're going to hear from some of the biggest names in animation who really dig deep into their journey to finding success. They share their best practices, the hardships they went through, and what to focus on to make it in today's changing animation world. And it's my hope that by sharing this info, that you too have the best chance of success. So let's begin. Today, we're talking about the ins and outs of being a storyboard artist with Dodge Greenley. Dodge started his career at Nickelodeon as a production intern working on SpongeBob SquarePants, where it wasn't long before he quickly rose to the ranks of storyboard artist on shows like Sanjay and Craig and Pinky Malinky, and now he's working at Cartoon Network on their next big hit. And besides being a super rad storyboard artist, Dodge is quite popular on Instagram, where he publishes absolutely ridiculous comics, and in fact, that's actually how I discovered his work. So Dodge, thank you for coming on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Good. So let's start things off. What interested you in getting into the animation industry in the first place?
I always drew when I was a kid, just always drawing, and I always said that I wanted to be a cartoonist, which now I don't know what that even means, but as a kid, it's like I want to draw and make funny things, but I didn't think that I could do it. I thought I didn't think that people actually did it. It was like, that's cool that, Bill Watterson is a person, but I can't do it. So I went to a liberal arts school, which is just like a academic, studying for studying's sake. And it wasn't until my senior year that I was like, oh, I've wanted to work in animation basically this whole time. So I should do that. And the kind of big impetus for me, it was actually Toy Story 3 that I saw it between my junior and senior year of college. And it was just the most I've always wanted to do this thing. I'm watching this movie. I want to be a part of this. I see there's obviously somebody who's doing the lighting and somebody who's doing the animating and somebody who's doing the writing, that there's you can see in the Pixar movies that there's just hundreds of people that all contribute, and it's I want to be in that community. So then basically I graduated college and moved out to LA and didn't know anything about animation and figured it out from there.
So, how did you figure it out? So you didn't know anything about animation, and then suddenly you're a storyboard artist? Well, there's got to be something in between there.
It was not.
You moved to LA, and then what?
So I moved to LA. I worked at a doggy daycare, and I applied to every job in animation, every entry-level job in animation I could find, every internship. I eventually got an internship at Nickelodeon, which itself, I remember because I was in LA, listening to a bunch of podcasts of how did people do this? And I remember people would always be yeah, I moved to LA and then I worked a shitty, terrible job for a long time. And then I got this break and now that led to this. And it's wait, how did you get that thing? So I applied to the internship online, and I actually later found out when I was working at Nickelodeon that my resume got weeded out in the first round. But I mean, it really is this convoluted that, so my sister's college roommate, uh, his cousin had a friend that worked at Nickelodeon. So like I was just talking to every person in LA that I had any sort of personal connection with. And I would get coffee with them or talk to them or something. And almost all of them were dead ends. You know, like you talk to most people and they're just like, yeah, I mean, you're great. I would hire you, but like, I can't hire people. Like, if anybody hits me up and is like, cool, like I'll show you my art or whatever, and it's like, great, you have cool art. I'm a storyboard artist. Like, I don't have anything to do with hiring people. Um, but so most of them were a dead end, and that one, like, my resume got into the right hands, and I got an interview, and I guess interviewed well and got the internship at Nickelodeon.
Wait, so your original application got like trashed, but through
Yeah,
your sister's college roommate's cousin's friend,
yeah,
somehow you made a connection with them, and then you put the resume in their hands, and they're like, "You're hired."
yeah. So that person was a producer on SpongeBob. So basically, my resume, instead of going through the whole internal process at Nickelodeon, which, like I said, like I found out it got weeded out in the internal process of like the regular thing of like they get 1,000 resumes, and they basically have interns at Nickelodeon just like look at resumes and make semi-arbitrary decisions, throwing things out. A lot of it is like if they've heard of the school. Like everybody, when you're 22, every single resume looks exactly the same. It's like, cool, you got good grades, you made things, they're all the same. And so it's like, oh, I haven't heard of this school, gone. And I went to this tiny school in Iowa that nobody's ever heard of that isn't an art school. And like at Nickelodeon, there's probably like 5 schools are the primary schools that they recruit from.
Do you know what those are?
Um, this is Nickelodeon. It's probably different at different places, but it's like a lot of it is stuff in California. So it's like Cal State Fullerton has an animation program. Um, San Jose State in California has an animation program. Cal Arts is obviously like a very famous one. Um, like Loyola Marymount, USC, UCLA, like literally schools in LA and in California. Sheridan is actually one because I know a handful of people from Sheridan. Um, Side note, of almost all the people that I know, anybody who talks about their college, they're always like, I didn't learn anything. And I feel like the people that went to Sheridan are the ones that are like, no, I actually learned a lot in school. So I think you made the right choice.
Great. So with your application, did you not have to put together like a portfolio too to show off all your art and stuff, or it's just a resume? Like what was on your resume that was so impressive, or did they
So
even?
nothing was on my resume. It was literally just like somebody was like, this is like a nice, smart guy.
Okay.
And like a personal recommendation saying this is a nice, smart guy is everything. Because your portfolio for a production internship doesn't really matter because they're like you don't do any art in basically any internships, at least at the major studios. If you're doing art as an intern, you're at a small studio and you're probably being taken advantage of in some way.
All
Um,
right. So what do you actually do as well, specifically a production intern at Nickelodeon?
um, you're basically like the production assistant's assistant. So the production staff is doing basically everything that's in between art. So it's like keeping track of schedules, moving materials from one step to the next step. So like if I finish a storyboard, I'm going to hand it off to the production assistant, and then they're going to prep the storyboard to go into animatic. And so that might be as simple as like exporting JPEG files to put into like Premiere for editing or something. And then like that work is just compounded by you're working on 8 episodes at once. So there's a bunch of like little administrative tasks that go throughout the day. So the intern is like handed off all of the extra little side work of helping schedules, sending out emails, like I said, handing off documents from one person to another. I was working on SpongeBob, and they have a lot of like old hard copies of stuff, like pencil drawings and like paintings. It's crazy because like it doesn't feel like I was an intern that long ago. It was 6 years ago, but there's even that like transition. There was a lot more like practical, traditional medium stuff in animation than there is now. Like they were still storyboarding digitally, but they had started on SpongeBob. They had started storyboarding digitally like maybe a year before that. And now basically all storyboarding is done digitally, and like all design is done digitally and stuff like that. There's very few shows that like, and so what I was doing would like be taking old pencils and like scanning them in and photocopying them. And I spent a ton of time at a photocopier. It's very like quintessential like boring intern work.
So, okay, so you said like all the major studios, their interns don't work on any art, yet that's like an intern's dream, right? So how did
Yeah.
you make the leap from sitting at the photocopier to sitting at the Cintiq and doing storyboarding? Like production assistant doesn't intern doesn't exactly sound like the path to become a storyboard artist, you know?
Yeah. So part of it is that if you're 22 or 23, if you're like straight out of school, you're probably a pretty shitty artist. Like there's a handful of people that come out like straight out of school and are actually like ready for professional work. And it's like super rare, and it feels like, I don't know. To me, it feels like when I see somebody like that, it's like, whoa, that person's gonna do this. But at least for me, my art was terrible. Like I said, like I didn't go to an art school. I mostly like drew in my free time, um, and like did it as like a, not even like a hobby, like a neurotic habit. Um, and so working as a PA allowed me to basically, I worked with storyboards every day. I saw storyboards every day. So I learned a ton about storyboards just from osmosis. And then I would, my friend was, I mean, I was friends with the people on the crew. So one of my friends was a revisionist. And when she would leave, when she didn't have to like stay late to hit a deadline, I would like use her Cintiq and like practice storyboarding at night. And then I would show my boards to board artists, and get critiques and like work and like redo it. I did a lot of like storyboard testing, to practice storyboarding. So it really was practicing in my free time, but it helped a lot working in production just because I was around animation. So I learned a lot from it, like just how to do it. And then also like, I mean, it helped a ton that, so I was a production assistant on Sanjay and Craig, and like applied for a storyboard revisionist position on Sanjay and Craig, and everyone knew me really well and knew that I was like hardworking and knew the show really well because I had worked on it for over a year.
Right, that's awesome. Yeah, so I guess that was a pretty well, you clearly worked hard to get there, so that's why it paid off. Now you mentioned beforehand, like being a storyboard artist at Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network is a little different than a lot of the other studios because it's usually storyboarding is based off of a script versus where you're working, the story actually comes out, and the script, I guess, comes out of the storyboard. So can you kind of explain the difference there and what sets that apart and whatnot?
So there's kind of two kinds of shows. There's storyboard driven shows and script driven shows. And there's not a ton of storyboard driven shows. Most Cartoon Network shows are storyboard driven, but Cartoon Network has some script driven shows too. Right now, I think maybe all Nickelodeon shows are script driven now. But there's other places that approach it differently. But like, so a script driven show is like the writers like workshop a script and have like a final script before it goes to the storyboard artist. And they'll often write the full script and make all the designs for the characters, the designs for the backgrounds and stuff. and then the storyboard artist will work from that. Whereas like on the types of shows that I've always worked on, Sandra and Craig, Pinky Malinky, and the new show that I'm working on right now, we get an outline, which is usually like 2 or 3 pages, and it's the writers like write out an outline. There's little to no dialogue, and it's kind of the 3-act structure. It's like I'm trying to think of like an outline of an episode that I did for Pinky Malinky. It's like there's one where Pinky gets a hater. So it describes like, Pinky is hanging out with his friends and he like makes a post on Instagram, and then he gets a thumbs down. So this is what the outline would say. It would literally be like describing the actions that happen, but there's very little dialogue. And then as a board artist, you go in, you write the dialogue as you're boarding. And it's interesting because even I've been talking to more board artists on storyboard driven shows lately. And like, I like to actually write out basically kind of a rough script before I start storyboarding. But a lot of people draw first, and then kind of based on the expressions or based on the shots, they'll write dialogue. Whereas like, I'll like do some writing and then drawing and rewriting and drawing and rewriting. I love it. A lot of it is like how a lot of feature animation is done. It really gives you a lot of agency in terms of like, you're directing and writing at the same time. So you can communicate a lot with shots that would be difficult to communicate in a script. And often it makes it so, yeah, like it affects the storytelling and pacing in a really exciting way.
You mentioned a few things. One was the 3-act structure. Using that same episode with the hater, could you kind of just break it down, how that would be,
Yeah, so you can break it down a ton, but usually the 3-act structure is your character's probably doing something normal and then like an inciting incident. So in this case, it was like the characters are doing something normal. They're like taking pictures of each other, which is kind of something established in the show that they always do. And then the thing that's different about today is that they get a negative comment. And so then in the second act, you're like exploring that inciting incident. So they're like in the second act of this episode, they're trying to contact this hater and like charm him and make him like them. And then the third act is the conclusion. It's kind of as simple as that, but then there's just like a ton of like terrible screenwriting books about like breaking down that structure even further, that there's often like the first half of the second act is excuse me, the first half of the second act is often kind of they're approaching the inciting incident and everything's going well, and then at the halfway point things go poorly and you have like an all is lost moment. You can really see this like if you watch like Marvel movies and Pixar movies. They're like very hyper structured movies that like once you've learned this, you're like for me it's like watching this, like you want the character to win and I'm like, oh, they haven't hit the all is lost moment yet. They've got to lose everything, be totally destroyed, and that's when they finally, Thor gets his hammer back and the lightning strikes and stuff. Right. And then the resolution can finally happen.
So, keeping in mind this structure, where do you put all the like creative energy into? Like, is it the little moments that are in the second act, or is it sprinkled throughout? And
yeah, so the structure, like part of it is, especially in episodic stuff, if it doesn't have that structure, I mean, just in the simplest sense, like I said, the structure is really like something new happens, you explore it, and it's concluded. Like if you get far away from that, a show can be meandering, it can be boring basically. And there's some TV shows that break that structure really well. And I'm thinking of like shows like Louis, which I feel bad for referencing now because Louis C.K. sucks. But that was like, there's shorts, there's longer segments, but it doesn't have to have like a story arc in each episode. And so in terms of like exploring it, part of, I don't know, I really like accessible media. Like I'm saying, like what got me into this is like Pixar and like Nickelodeon and stuff. Um, so I like working within the structure that's already there, and finding ways to do new plays on it. Um, I don't know. I don't think you have to reinvent the wheel each time you tell a story, right?
Gotcha. So when you're exploring all the different, acts and storyboards and stuff, how does the revision process go? Do you just kind of sit there until you come up with some good ideas and then pass it on, or do you work with the director or something else?
Yeah, so basically we have 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the show, to work on a storyboard. And it's broken up usually into 3 or 4 pitches. So we'll usually, like, you get the outline and then you do your first pass. Your first pass usually has really bad drawings, really terrible jokes, often doesn't fully make sense. Some panels, depending on how fast your deadline is, some panels you won't even have time to draw it and you'll write in the character jumps out a window. But you're kind of just figuring out the pacing and how it all works. And then you pitch that to your showrunner, and maybe some other like you're kind of pitching it to your immediate bosses, and then they'll give you notes. So like thinking of shows you might have heard of, like Steven Universe, you would pitch it to Rebecca Sugar, and then Rebecca Sugar, who's not personally storyboarding every episode, is going to give you notes. And since it's her show, she knows the characters better than anyone else. So she trusts all the board artists to do a pass, and then she's going to be like, this character wouldn't say a line like this. This shot is a great shot, but it doesn't fit the aesthetic style of our show. Do this. Or even just like, this isn't working. Like, you need to redo this. So you're just getting input from people who are usually more experienced and have a better grasp of the show itself from you. And so that's your first pitch. And then in the next pitch, you revise the board. You're taking the notes from all of your supervisors. You're taking your own kind of, you're processing those notes and taking your own viewpoint. Maybe there was a joke that you didn't think worked, but nobody said anything about, and so you rework it yourself. And so you pitch it again, probably in a week or two, and then you get even more notes, again, usually from the showrunner. Sometimes there's more people in the second meeting. And then you'll often pitch it to network executives. And network executives are like, there's like the people that work on your show, which are like the creator of your show, like somebody who supervises all of the storyboards, maybe your head writer is giving notes. And then a network executive is somebody that like works at the studio, and they're going to be more concerned with like standards and practices things, like kind of representing Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon as a whole. And so if there's crass things or things that are dangerous for kids, they're going to give you more notes. They're also kind of bigger scope people. So if like they might give a note that a character in the last 3 episodes isn't coming off as likable enough, and they really want the titular character of this series to be really likable. So you'll get those notes and then have to go back in the episode and revise it. So most of storyboarding is revising, and collaborating and taking notes. So that's kind of a weird aspect of working professionally, is that even if you're an incredible artist, if you're not good at collaborating and working with other people's input, you're gonna have a rough time.
Yeah. Is any of that intimidating? Like you pitch it so many times to so many different people. Like, what's that like?
I think because I worked in production first, I saw so many artists go through so many pitches that it didn't feel like oppressive to me, because I saw how normal that was. That I remember like learning about animation and entertainment in general and hearing about like how terrible notes are and being like, I just want to make my pure idea. Like, why would I want somebody else's input. But it's really normal and fun. Usually I like getting notes for the most part. I mean, it's really awesome to show somebody something that you're working on, and then to have a crazy talented person who you've like looked up to for years and like watched shows that they've made be like, oh, that's great, here's how you can make it better. You're like, hell yeah, of course I'll make it better. And having somebody, yeah, just with tons of experience give you good notes is often a good experience. There's times when you screw it up and they like chew you out and then you feel terrible about yourself, but that's just part of the game.
So it sounds like collaboration and revision are like huge skills to have. Is there anything else that like really makes you succeed in your role, you think?
Just being funny. I know
Just
that
being funny.
I was just talking with my friends about this, that there's like a lot of mistakes you can make and get away with if your work is good. And that's like the most ambiguous, like what is good work? I don't know what is funny, but like it's just true.
So what are some of the mistakes, or like what's some of the biggest mistakes you've made or see other people making, or
It's just in terms of like storyboards, like you can see to like usually there's probably five or six storyboard artists on a crew, and there might be one storyboard artist whose drawings are literally like worse than another storyboard artist, like just like are bad drawings, but if they're funny enough, people will look over it. And that's not to say like don't work on your drawing skills, work on your fucking drawing skills and then keep working on your drawing skills. Like if you want to work in animation and you're listening to this podcast, like work on your drawing skills more. I don't care how good you are, work on it more.
so what does that mean specifically? Are you talking about like life drawing or just like cafe sketches, or like what keeps you fresh?
Just drawing more. Like I know that sounds dumb, but like life drawing is great. Drawing your own designs is great. Like drawing more storyboards is great. Just like the more pencil mileage you get, literally the better you will be. Um, yeah, be good. That's my like terrible advice is be
Yeah.
good. Be funny, be good at drawing.
What specific things do you do to get there? Like you were storyboarding, practicing after hours on when you were an intern, but like
Yeah. So I really like narrowed my focus down really hard in like storytelling specifically, that like I personally am not a great draftsman. I'm not great at figure drawing. I should probably do a ton more figure drawing, especially like compared to a lot of my peers that went to art schools who were figure drawing like 3 or 4 days a week for 4 years. Um, so I like when I was practicing storyboarding, I was basically like, okay, I'm just not even going to think about color or light for years. That's just like not something I'm even going to put any effort into, and I'm just going to focus on storytelling. So like pacing, joke timing. Joke timing is so hard with drawing because it's not coming out of your mouth. You can't just like do ba ba da ba da, but like pacing it out over panels and having like a reveal happen naturally is super difficult. And so I just focused on that basically, and through like repetitive action of that, I got better at drawing also. I took a bunch of improv classes. There's a really good comedy scene in LA. So I went to the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater and took a bunch of classes there. And that helped me a ton in like thinking about comedy and thinking about like joke writing. But that I'm very much the exception. There's like not a lot of people in animation that take like comedy classes, but that helped me a lot.
so it sounds like you kind of figured out what skills you wanted to work on and what you were lacking, and you just strategically worked on them then. I
Yeah,
mean, You didn't take the more traditional route of going to 4-year animation school and doing all this stuff. You're like, this is what I want to do. You moved to LA, you got your in through your sister's roommate's cousin's friend.
Yeah.
And then you worked after hours to get what you wanted. That's super awesome. What is it actually like working at, you've worked at Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network, the two biggest children's animated television channels. Like, it's a lot of people's dreams to work there. Can you just candidly speak about that?
It's great. I mean, you even just said like it's a lot of people's dreams, and I'm sitting here and I'm like, wow, that's so cool that I did that. That's my dream. It's great. People are just like, it's super hardworking dorks. It's like the like just like really inspirational people and a really inspirational community that just makes you want to work harder. It's also, can be a struggle. It's still a day job, it's still working on somebody else's art and not your own. But you can just get a lot out of that. You can get a lot out of working on other people's things and finding ways to make it your own and feel happy. I personally really like being a cog in the system and collaborating and stuff.
But you also, so you said you're working on somebody else's art, but you're also kind of doing your own thing on the side on the Instagram. Is that like an outlet for that?
Yeah, so the show that I last worked on Nickelodeon, Pinky Malinky, it went through like a whole weird thing where it got like it's on Netflix now, and I don't know like how much I can talk about the production process, but most shows, like animated shows, are really slow, so they usually take about a year to come out. And Pinky Malinky took almost 3 years to come out, which just things happen and it was so slow. But basically, for me as an artist, like I was really proud of the stuff that I was doing on that show, but it was so frustrating to not have anyone see it. And so frustrating. I just got so tired of saying, I work on the show, you haven't heard of it, it's not out on TV yet, saying that for years and years and years. And so I just started like putting more stuff on Instagram as an outlet. And also part of that was in terms of my own like artistic progression. It was so difficult just to do my job every day for so long, just to be able to get everything done. And I like finally hit a point where I was a good enough artist that I could do my job and still have creative energy afterwards to create my own things. And so I just started like putting a ton of stuff on Instagram. Also,
Yeah.
part of it was I was between jobs for a big chunk of it, that like I wrapped up working on Pinky Malinky and then kind of took a break in between before going to Cartoon Network. And so I spent a ton of time investing in like literally unemployed and just like doing comics for Instagram and kind of treating that as my job for a while.
Huh. So you didn't go back to dog walking, I guess, right?
No.
Yeah, well, why don't we talk a little bit about the job security thing? Because I know we kind of talked a little bit about this beforehand, where you have a contract for a season and then you're waiting for it to get renewed or whatnot. So, what's that experience like, working on a show and then it being finished and then like trying to figure out what to do next?
Yeah, so we were talking about this before where you basically get a contract per season. So you only ever really get a contract 1 year at a time. And then often that contract will get extended when a season 2 gets picked up. But it's very rare that a show gets picked up for even 3 seasons. A lot of shows just make the first season. And so it's stressful to look for work over and over again, but the animation community is small, especially if you do a good job and establish good contacts. People are used to people looking for work, so it's not looked down on for you to like text all of your friends and be like, hey, I'm looking for a job right now. Or even like I've been working for a little while and just yesterday a friend messaged me and said, hey, are you looking for work? I know they're hiring on this show right now, because I had talked about looking for work months ago. So part of it is there's like a community around people. People are kind of constantly shifting around and looking for work. and then you'll have these dry periods. Like I said, I was unemployed for a while, um, and it was fine. You know, part of it is you try and save up money so you can be unemployed for a little while. I know some people, it's very feast or famine, in and out, but for me it's been relatively consistent with one chunk of time where I was unemployed that I kind of really enjoyed and made a bunch of comics for Instagram.
Yeah. So, well, it sounds like you said collaboration is like a really big skill just
Yeah.
in putting together a storyboard, but it sounds like that extends to your whole career and just the community itself. So,
Yeah.
um, so I have another question kind of about how when you're doing the storyboarding itself, like you said, you'll go to the showrunner or the show creator and they'll give you feedback because they know the characters and whatnot. But how important is it to be connected with the audience you're creating a show for? Like with Pinky Malinky, and the show you're creating now, were you actively, like, would you say you were researching or connected with the age demographic of that show, or was it more or less like I'm gonna have fun, create my own jokes, and whatever gets cut, what gets improved gets improved?
Maybe this is dumb, but I think it is like straight up zero importance. Um, that like one, animation is so slow that, like I said, like there was no interaction with the audience for Pinky Malinky. Like we didn't know, or there were characters on Sanjay and Craig that would get like a big reaction. Like a side character gets introduced and it gets a big reaction that all the fans like it, but the episode, we worked on the episode a year ago, and if we knew that the fans would like that character that much, we would have brought them back. But it's already been a year now, and that character is not going to appear for the people who just saw it for at least another year or two. So it's really, animation is just so slow. It's hard to actually have that interactive kind of communication with the audience. I know shows like Steven Universe, part of it is they have such a rabid audience, they have such a big fan base that they can kind of communicate with them a little bit more on Tumblr. But in terms of a reaction, it's super slow. And the shows, I mean, talking about like making jokes for kids, the shows I've always worked on have always, in the corporate sense, been for the 6 to 12-year-old demographic. And I don't think I know a single 6 to 12-year-old. My nephew's 2. I watched Pinky Malinky with him, and he thought it was totally boring because he's 2 and like can't follow story at all. I really like write jokes to make myself laugh and make my friends laugh, like make the storyboard artists that I'm working with laugh. And then, just try and make it not about sex, drugs, and violence. Like it's really is that simple.
So, yeah, okay, that's really interesting actually. And like, how do you gauge whether a show is going to be successful? And if your show has like multiple seasons and you know that one season is coming to an end and you're still working on another season, are you like anxiously trying to do your best to make the show successful in that sense, like with what you know?
I think there is no way to tell if a show will be successful, just like straight up. I really thought you could like, oh, this is good. This thing that we made is like good and it'll break out in this way, but you're just so close to it. And even like probably like the worst show you've seen on TV has had really incredible people working on it, doing a really good job, and still there was something that didn't translate, something that didn't come together, and it ended up not being good. I feel like something that even like a storyboard that was really good in the second or third pitch, there's something doesn't translate in the timing in an animatic, or like a voice actor kind of takes a different approach than what the board artist intended, or even just like the color, the mood of the color, like isn't reading in the same way that the black and white drawings were reading. And that's not even that the voice actor made a mistake or a color artist made a mistake or a board artist made a mistake. It's just that like I think the natural state of art is terrible. And so everybody doing their best job are working to make it unterrible, but when it all comes together, it can often just be terrible. So
I mean, that makes sense.
like I think the idea of knowing that a show will be a hit or will work, it's all just magic and luck, that like you can do a really good job and guess what, your show still sucks. And you can do a really good job and like your show's awesome and nobody sees it, you know?
Right.
So to me, it's all just like do your best work and hope. I don't know.
So still on that topic, I mean, on your Instagram, you have like almost 21,000 followers now, and like you're clearly a hit with what you post. And so
But
are
I don't
you
get this at
are you
all
I
because
was just
like
gonna ask, are you taking that same approach? You're just like, it's magic, I just do what I
no,
want,
it's totally
or
magic. Actually, Instagram is more proof that it's magic because the posts that I'm like, oh, they're gonna eat this up, this is great, are the ones that like go nowhere. The posts where I'm like, oh, I just gotta get something out this week, I don't know, I'm sorry, are the ones that like people share a ton. Like it's I don't know. It like I just try and create as much good things as possible, and some things will resonate with people, and some things won't. Um, I don't know. The more art I create, the more I feel like this, that it's like it's magic, and hopefully you just produce enough good things that they'll click right at the right time. But especially with Instagram, like scrolling through the like just the likes as a metric, which is a terrible metric for whether something is good or not, like they're insane. And like you can do that. You can go on Instagram and just be like, what the hell is this? Like, why did this get so many likes and then this other thing didn't? It's so weird, man.
couldn't you say that, your experience in comedic timing and storyboarding and stuff contributed to some of that though?
Oh, I definitely think there's like an objective as a whole. Like I like in terms of my own Instagram, like I got good at storytelling and comedic timing. And so like as a whole, like by producing good work consistently, like I've been able to build up a bit of a following. But in terms of any individual post, I don't know.
All right.
You know?
So I also want to ask you about that too, because I've heard people with a lot of followings on Instagram as well kind of have competing opinions. Some people say like, the people who have 20,000 followers that I know, they're like an entry level person at our studio, and
Mhm.
some people who have like amazing work have no followers. And so, what kind of impact do you think social media has had on your career, or reflection of your career it's had really? I mean, do you think it's gotten you more connections? I mean, we're talking, which is goes
Yeah.
that, I guess, but like direct impact on your career or your professional skill set or anything like that. Like,
Yeah. I mean, it's had direct impact on my career. I think I largely have the job that I have now because of my Instagram, even though I had already been working and had established contacts. Um, the people that found me for this show like saw my Instagram, and I got a meeting from that, and then they like passed my work along, and then like I didn't have to test for the show that I'm working on now because they said like, oh, we saw your Instagram, you can tell a joke and tell a story, we don't need you to
so
like.
they like cold reached out to you from Instagram, like you didn't have a contact with them before.
I had been in contact with Cartoon Network. Like there's just animation is small and you work around, and like because there's these year-long contracts, like even if you work at one studio. So I worked at Nickelodeon for 6 years, and even working at Nickelodeon, by the end of that 6 years, I had worked with people that worked at Disney and Cartoon Network and Bento Box and all these different places, just because people move around so much. So I had contact with people at Cartoon Network, but it was like somebody in development at Cartoon Network whose kind of job is to like look for new artists. They found me on Instagram, and like we had lunch and like talked about pitching a show and stuff. And that I said that I was like looking for work, and so they passed my Instagram to a showrunner who was starting a show and looking for a staff. So my Instagram personally helped me a lot. I do think Instagram like can be a ton of leverage and can kind of give you that good clout, but I don't think it's necessary. I know a ton of successful, great artists with little or no Instagram following. But you know, there's nothing wrong with an Instagram following. It will help you if you have it.
Fair enough, fair enough. Well, I think we're just wrapping up about now, unless anything else comes up. But kind of overall, you know, what's we talked about a lot of skill sets you need to have and stuff. What would be your biggest advice for somebody who wants to practice storyboarding, especially because like thinking about how you did it late at nights and you saw storyboards every single day, how can somebody go from existing to becoming a storyboard artist? Like, what are the steps that you'd recommend in between?
Yeah, I know. I mean, I feel like advice like this is always kind of trite and boring, but like,
Give us the boring trite stuff.
I feel like figure out the thing that you're good at and maybe like have always been good at. That it's crazy. My mom works in developmental psychology, so she like talks about like we're like hanging out with my nephew who's 2, and she's like, oh, look how he like bobs to the music. You never did that. And I like don't get music. I'm terrible with music. And she's like, but even when you were 2, you would like cry when you didn't get your story at night. That like since I was 2, I was into storytelling. And it's not as simple as like, oh, like you're a 2-year-old, you should be a storyboard artist. But there was something there that I was always excited about. And it's interesting that like as an adult and as a growing artist, like finding like, okay, I'm not the best draftsman. Like I see all these incredible artists around me who are incredible draftsmen, but I love storytelling and I love like comedic pacing and timing. That like I said, like I had this background in improv and stuff. And so like just fucking keying in on that thing and becoming the best person at the thing that I do. And so if you're interested in storyboarding, thinking about like what pulls you into storyboarding, um, and like, are you interested in storyboarding because you like drawing? Like you might actually be a better designer, you know? Are you interested in storyboarding because you like action? Then like just draw action stuff. Like don't even like bother, frankly, like bother learning to be funny. But if you like doing action that is funny, like learn those things, you know? So this is kind of general trite frou-frou advice, but like figure out your thing and just go hard on it. Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff I like to hear. So I don't think that's trite at all. Okay, one last question here. What can you share about the new show? I know it's super secretive and you hate being like, I'm working on a new show. You'll see it when it comes out in like 5 years. But like, can you share anything at all on it right now? Like,
I really don't know. I probably would have just like talked a bunch about it, but I just talked to somebody on my production staff that was like, "Oh, you're not supposed to tell anyone about this show yet." Oh, because that's what we were talking about before. That I was trying to call you on Skype, and I was gonna use just the production Skype account because I couldn't get into my Skype account. But the production Skype is the name of the show, and I would have like leaked the name of the show.
well, I'm prepared to leak everything. So,
I mean, I can tell you that I'm working with some people that I worked on Pinky Malinky with. I'm working with some people that worked on Uncle Grandpa and Over the Garden Wall. My board artist worked on She-Ra. So it's a lot of great people that have worked on shows that hopefully you've like heard of and love already. The show is very it's storyboard driven, which and it's very like irreverent and goofy. It's definitely kind of what is like a good analogy? I don't know. It's very like post SpongeBob, post Uncle Grandpa, but a little more heart.
all right, I have no idea what that means, but okay. We'll find out, I guess, sometime. Okay, well, I think that's all, unless you have anything, any last minute stories or advice or anything you want to share. But Yeah,
Oh,
thanks. Oh,
wait, I am gonna give a little more practical advice. I feel like I gave the trite like do you and do you really hard. But in terms of like practical advice, if you want to learn storyboarding, so really like literally what I did. So what we do in animation if you're applying for a job is you take a test, which is usually like a simulation of what the workload would be of just a few days, and then you can show one that you're capable of doing the work, but two that you're like matching the tone and style of the show. So like a storyboard test would be on an outline driven show, they'll give you a portion of an outline and then you'll storyboard that. Or a script driven show, they'll give you a page of the script or something and you'll storyboard that. Or if you're a designer, they'll give you a couple sample designs from the show as is established, and then they'll be like, design a firefighter that fits in this world. And so you'll do a drawing. They maybe give you some character traits. He's like really rude and like always angry. So how are you going to draw that into a character and match the style of the show? So in terms of practical advice, for me, what I would do to practice storyboarding is, because I was a PA, I would just take the outlines from the show and board a section of that. And so part of my advice for people who want to practice storyboarding is a lot of times in your classes, you'll be asked to create a world, create characters, create designs, create a story, create a scenario. And all of that work is stuff that largely like storyboard artists don't do, that is split up between other people. And so the more that the way to make yourself learn to storyboard more is to take out a lot of that intensive, difficult thinking. So you can either like take maybe take a half a paragraph of a book you're reading, like take sections of something that is already established, and then you can maybe write dialogue. You can maybe take a script of something, of like find a script of a movie you haven't seen before and start storyboarding that. Maybe like find an outline of a show. That's easier said than done. I had a lot of privilege in that I was working in animation when I was learning to storyboard, so I was taking an outline of a show I worked on. But finding ways where you don't have to design characters, even if you're doing a story that would never be on SpongeBob, you can use the SpongeBob character designs just so you can practice storyboarding, which is, you know, shots, composition, writing, and storytelling in general. So using designs that are already made actually allows you to just create more storyboards rather than spinning your wheels and trying to think of a whole design. I'm a terrible designer. I'm like really bad at designing. So I really enjoy having an incredible artist create character designs that I can just, I love drawing acting. I love drawing composition and shots and stuff. But I don't like creating characters from scratch. So it's awesome to have a way better artist do that for me.
yeah, awesome. Well, that is pretty practical. So you're saying kind of become a very specialist instead of a kind of a generalist
Yeah.
type of
A
thing.
lot of school for animation, they like make you create a short film or something and make you do every single part of the process, which I think is really good in terms of learning in general and making yourself a better artist. But in terms of working in the animation industry, they don't care at all. Like for me, they don't care. If I was colorblind, I could do my job. Like they don't care anything about how I do color. They don't care a ton about how my designs are. Um, they care about my writing and my storyboarding. And it's like you have to be such a specialist because the way the work is divided, it's so compartmentalized. So you need to be a specialist at that one thing. And similarly, like when I talk to young artists and they say things like, oh, I want to be a character designer or a board artist or maybe a background painter. When you say those three things to me, it means you have no clue what you want to do. But when you say, I want to be a board artist, that's like what motivates me. Even if you're lying to me, I can give you better practical advice for being a board artist instead of being like, I don't know, that's a lot of things you want to do. So like focusing on that one thing and becoming an expert at that one thing, I think is maybe not the best thing for, I do think it's the best thing for your artistic development, but it is definitely the best thing for your professional development. Be good at one thing and like be awesome at it.
So when applying for like a storyboard artist role or like character designer, like don't put your short film first, like put your boards first and put that as like an afterthought, like by the way, here's my other stuff type of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kinda. I
Oh,
mean,
nice.
if your short film's crazy good, like then show it. But I think I've never hired someone, so I'm talking out of my ass a little bit here. But like seeing a short film where the boarding is okay and the color is okay and the characters are okay is means nothing. Whereas like seeing a short film where the character designs are really good and I have the audio turned off because I'm watching it at work in like a small YouTube window that you sent me, but the designs are really good, I'll think about more, you know?
Makes sense. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, all of what you said is really awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all that. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the podcast here, Dodge.
Yeah, of course. Good luck in your journey to you and all
Thank
your
you.
listeners.
Thank you. Yeah, and to you as well. I mean, I really enjoyed hearing your story of how you got to where you're going and what you're working on next.
Yeah, I'm gonna
So,
keep kicking ass. You're gonna hear my name more.
perfect. Now, just before we leave, I want to share how you can get in touch with Dodge if you have any questions or want to follow his work. And that's simply by going to his Instagram, which is instagram.com/Dodge Greenley. And I'll share the link in the description. And that's all for now. Okay, bye.